we are 10, so you can take 2, 3, 4 minutes, whatever you like, in terms of introducing your people who are there on your session, and then you can start the session.
Okay, thank you. So we have three interesting papers lined up. The first one is titled Rules versus Discretion in Market Surveillance, Evidence from India. This is a paper by Nidhi Agarwal from IIM Udaipur, Surabhi Bhatia from Mint, and Bhargavi Zaveri from the Finance Research Group. And I believe Bhargavi is presenting the paper here. This is to be discussed by Sameer Shah from Dwara Trust. The second paper is on trading volume and dispersion of signals. This is to be presented by Nidhi Vidani from IIM Bengaluru. The discussant is Prasanna Tantri from ISB. And the last paper is on sensationalism in online news. This is a paper to be presented by Gunchen Kim from Rutgers University. And the discussant is Ram from ISB. So if I have understood the structure correctly, we're going to have 15 minutes for paper presentations, 10 minutes for discussions, and then 10 minutes for Q&A from the floor, as it were. And what I will do is I will inform you when you have 3 minutes left, and then when you have 1 minute left, so that'll help you with managing your time.
My understanding, Vikas, is that all the sessions are being recorded. We also have a chat session, so people can
on
also
Slack,
post their sessions, post their questions on the chat. I hope co-authors are here, and if co-authors are here, they can also respond on the chat. I am not sure where Slack comes in. I have not the faintest clue about Slack. So, but I did receive some things about Slack here. But if you have any questions, you're very welcome to post them on the Zoom session, on the Zoom chat, and people can respond. Everyone can see. We have no secrets here. So that's one. Second, I believe everyone can share their screen. So therefore, people who are going to present will be able to share their screen. That's my understanding. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's consistent with my understanding as well.
So we can.
We did test it, so everybody should be able to share their screens.
Okay.
And I believe either me or Vikas or both have our co-hosts, and therefore, if anybody's mic goes off by mistake, and he goes off for a walk, we can mute you.
Yeah. So Pradeep, I think that you are the host, and I think that the Jyoti and Shaina and the EMF team or the conference team are the co-hosts. Right now, I don't think Vikas has the power to mute. You have the power to mute.
I can't see I'm not being able to see the thing which comes to the host, but it doesn't matter. Maybe there's.
It's an invisible power.
Yeah, it's a superpower.
Fair enough. And for everybody else, I mean, if you're able to, open your cameras, that will be nicer. That will be even nicer, because then we can, engage more easily. But of course, you're welcome in any form.
Okay, so I suppose we are right in time to start with our first presentation. I believe this is going to be presented by Bhargavi on the first paper. So Bhargavi, the floor is yours.
Sure. Hello, everyone. Just give me 1 second. I'll just share my presentation. Is it visible?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Just give me 1 second. I think it's gone. All right. Hello, everyone, and thank you for giving us the opportunity to present this paper at the Emerging Markets Conference. What's more, we are really excited that we are the first presenters in this, first time ever virtual Emerging Markets Conference. So really looking forward to everybody's feedback on this. Today, we are going to be presenting our paper on a new surveillance mechanism that was introduced in the Indian equity market in 2017. I will first just talk about a little bit about what is this new surveillance mechanism, what are the questions that we ask, what is the data and approach that we take to answering these questions, what are our findings, the key findings, and what might be the implications of our key findings. If at any point in time the slides do not shift, I would appreciate if I can just get an alert so that I don't keep talking about things that are on the next slide, which can't be seen. So what does this paper do? We talk about, this paper really examines a new surveillance mechanism called the graded surveillance mechanism that was introduced in 2017 in the Indian equity markets. This mechanism essentially imposes trading restrictions on a certain set of firms that are trading on the market. Who are these firms? These are firms whose returns are not commensurate with the financial health of the firm. And I'll talk about the criteria for this a little bit later. But the main objectives of the graded surveillance mechanism, as reflected in the circular that was published by the National Stock Exchange, is to alert and advise investors to be extra cautious when they deal with these securities whose returns are not commensurate with the financial health of the firm. And it's to advise market participants to carry out necessary due diligence when they are dealing in the securities of these firms. Now, this surveillance mechanism struck us as being rather unique for a couple of reasons. First of all, surveillance tools around the world, around markets around the world, really actually, they track trading patterns. They try and identify common manipulative schemes. So, for example, a survey of about 25 jurisdictions by a paper that was published in the American Law and Economics Review in 2008. The authors, Cumming and Johan, they surveyed 25 jurisdictions, and they found that actually the surveillance tools implemented in the markets of these 25 jurisdictions essentially track a set of about 28 commonly known manipulative practices, such as whitewashing, synchronized trades. They particularly track trading patterns in or around earnings disclosure seasons, etc. On the other hand, GSM, the graded surveillance mechanism that we are discussing, really focuses on the firm fundamentals and what are the returns on the stocks of firms with certain kinds of fundamentals. Secondly, most of these surveillance mechanisms, surveillance tools in securities markets actually conduct an inquiry. They identify whether the trade was genuinely manipulative or not, perhaps even give a hearing to the traders involved, and then they impose the requisite sanction. Normally, it begins with an alert, a warning, and then so on and so forth. On the other hand, GSM is really ex ante because there is no manipulation or manipulative scheme proved. If the firm satisfies certain criteria with respect to its financial health and returns, it will be put in this graded surveillance mechanism. And I'll talk about what the sanctions that follow in a bit. The sanction normally in a surveillance scheme is targeted towards the manipulators, whereas in a graded surveillance mechanism, since the firm is put under the GSM framework, all the investors, all the people who are invested in the firm or are likely to invest in the firm are therefore really targeted. It's a broad sanction. It's not a very targeted sanction. So for these three reasons, this particular mechanism struck us as unique. Now, how are firms selected for being subjected to this graded surveillance mechanism? So there are 7 stages of this surveillance framework. The circulars really define the criteria only for the first 2 stages. So if a firm meets certain net worth or net fixed asset related criteria, so for example, if the net worth of the firm is 100 million or less, or if the net fixed assets of the firm are 100 million or less, but the PE ratio of the firm is twice than that of the Nifty PE, then the firm is put in stage 0. Similarly, if the market cap of the firm is about 250 million or less, but its PE ratio is either negative or twice Nifty PE, then the firm is put in stage 1 of the surveillance. What happens when firms go into surveillance? Like I mentioned, there are 7 stages of surveillance. If the firm is in stage 0, it's just a warning. So every time a trader tries to place an order on the firm's security, his system nearly triggers a warning. if the firm is in stage 1, the sanctions, the intensity of the sanction, the intensity of the trading restriction actually increases as the stage increases. So for example, if the firm is in stage 1, the security is put in trade for trade window, which means mandatory physical settlement with a lower price band of about 5%. Then the sanction increases. So, and things get pretty serious when the firm is put in stage 3. So in stage 3, the firm is allowed to be traded on only once a week, and there has to be, the buyer has to keep an additional security deposit of 100% of the trade value. Look at stage 6. All right, the firm is allowed to be traded only once a month with no upward movement in price, and the buyer has to put up 200% of the trade value as additional surveillance deposit with the exchange. So the sanctions, the trading restrictions vary with each stage, and the criteria for putting a firm in each of these stages is not clear except for stage 0 and stage 1. So what are the questions that we asked? First of all, we focus on the quality of implementation of this measure. We asked whether the GSM surveillance framework is consistently applied across firms that meet the stated requirements for stage 0 and stage 1. Here, we study the characteristics of the firms that were subjected to GSM and that finally exited GSM. Second, we asked what is the impact of a firm being subjected to GSM on its liquidity and returns. Here we use an event study framework where we use propensity score matching to identify the impact of the GSM intervention on a set of similar treated and control firms. All right. The data that we use is hand-collected data from NSE circulars that are published on the exchange's website. Each circular typically tells you which firm went into surveillance, which firm exited surveillance, and which firm continued to remain in surveillance. Normally, these are quarterly circulars. However, we have also seen circulars that have actually brought firms into surveillance or changed the stages of the surveillance in the middle of a quarter. We collect data for 2 years, beginning from March 2017, when the surveillance was first implemented, ending March 2019. So we have a total of about 121 securities, 111 unique firms, because 10 of these actually exited and entered GSM during our study period. At the end of our study period, we find that out of these 121 securities, 74 continued to remain in GSM. And in terms of the stages, the distribution is in the table on the screen. We find that actually bulk of them are concentrated in stage 1, which means that the security is in trade for trade window and a smaller, narrower price band of 5%. The next highest number is in stage 0, which means that traders are just given warnings whenever the trade is obviously happening manually. The trader system throws up a warning the moment he tries to place an order for a security that is in stage 0. The next highest number is stage 2, and so on and so forth. The third column shows you the stickiness of the stage. What is the average period for which a script was in particular stage? So we find that actually stages 6, 3, and stage 1 have been pretty sticky. So even though only 4 securities were subjected to stage 6 during our study period, it's a pretty sticky stage. We find that during our study period, firms have actually jumped stages, and most of the jumps are towards the higher stages. So we rarely find firms going back from stage 4 to stage 2, for example. We find that the trend is always towards a higher stage. Now, just to give you a flavor of what kind of firms really went through this kind of surveillance mechanism, a bulk of these firms were actually categorized as wholesale trading and fund-based financial services. Most of these firms are more than 20 years old. Most of them were listed either in the 2-year period of 95-96 or 2007 and 2008. Overall, we find that actually these firms are pretty, they don't have a very high liquidity, and a bulk of them also have negative P ratio. What was another interesting takeaway about the characteristics of the firms is their equity holdings. So if you see, most of these firms, these firms were largely held by non-promoters, and even amongst the non-promoters, so more than 50% of the shares of these firms were held by non-promoters. And we don't see much exit of promoters during our study period. And even amongst these non-promoters, we find that bulk of them were non-institutional non-promoters. So it looks like a bulk of these firms were actually held by individuals. We are unsure who are these. They may be brokers with proprietary trades. They may be other individuals. We don't know. We haven't gone into the nature of the shareholding of the non-promoter, non-institutional shareholders. Okay, so what do we find? We find that about 34% of our sample of 101 firms, we have data drops for about 10 firms out of the 121 securities. So 34% of 101 firms did not meet the pre-specified criteria related to net worth or net fixed assets or the PE ratio, right? And where we find that so for example, in for the firms which entered stage 0, about 16% of the firms did not meet the PE ratio criteria. For the firms which enter into stage 1, we find that nearly 45% of the firms actually did not meet the criteria that was specified for entry into stage 0 or stage 1. We were curious as to how do firms really exit GSM, because it seemed to us that none of these variables are likely to change so quickly over a quarter or two. And therefore, we also looked at the characteristics of firms that exited GSM. What we found is that of the 47 firms that exited GSM during our study period, more than 50% of the firms continued to exhibit at least one of their pre-GSM characteristics. So for example, if their P ratio was negative, it continued to have negative P ratio. More than 75% of the firms that exited GSM continued to show negative P ratio. So that, and just a note here that none of the circulars that talk about GSM or even SEBI, which talks about GSM in its annual report, have actually defined the criteria that are applied for taking a firm that is already in GSM out of GSM. What is the impact on the quality of the scripts? So here's 4 graphs. All right. So what we find is that when a firm enters into stage 0, if we look at a 5-day event window, there is a marginal difference in between the stock prices.
You have over 3 minutes.
Okay. We find that when a firm enters into stage 0, there is a marginal difference on the stock returns of the treated and the control firms. But when the firm enters stage 1, in the 10-day event window, there is a significant difference between the stock prices of the treated and the control firms. The difference increases in the 10-day window. The difference continues to be there even in the 5-day window. What is the impact on liquidity? Here, what we do is we do this across the 3 variables. We actually take the announcement date, the effective date. Now, what is the announcement date? Generally, the way GSM circulars are published is that first it is announced that this set of firms will be entering into GSM this quarter, and then there is a 10-day average window gap after which the security is actually put into GSM. So what we find is that while the liquidity, there is considerable volatility in the liquidity once a firm is announced as being eligible for entry into GSM, after the effective date, there is a significant drop in the liquidity of the treated firm. We also ran this analysis through a DID, through the difference in difference framework, and we find that the difference in the liquidity of the treated and controlled firms in the 10-day and the 7-day window period is statistically significant. All right, again, to understand what is the impact on exit, we find that firms which actually exit GSM, there is a significant difference on their stock prices between the stock prices of the controlled and the treated sample. And we find that the impact on liquidity is not as pronounced. There is a marginal increase in the liquidity of the treated sample after its exit, but we find that even after 10 days, the liquidity does not return to its pre-GSM levels. So what were the key learnings for us? Number one, there is considerable ambiguity on the implementation of this surveillance measure. So like we mentioned, there is no clarity on how firms skip stages, right? So the sanction, the trading restriction really depends on which stage you are in, but there is no clarity on how firms are shifting across stages. There is no clarity on how firms actually exit GSM. And like I mentioned, a bulk of the firms that exited GSM continue to have negative PE, continue to demonstrate some of the characteristics that put them into GSM in the first place. And this has significant implications for the rule of law and how consistent, what is the quality of implementation of this measure, and whether the measure is even achieving the purpose that it is sought to achieve. The measure obviously has costs because there is an impact on liquidity and an impact on the stock prices, and it is unclear whether it is really preventing actual manipulation. Sure, thanks. And finally, it's important to identify who is it that is being affected, most adversely affected by these measures, right? So like I showed that the firms that are part of our sample were actually where more than 50% of the holding was by non-individual, non-promoters. And it's important to identify who are these people who are being stuck with these shares because of the firm going under surveillance. And it would also have implications for the cost of capital of the firms who enter into GSM. And this is something that can be explored further. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we have a discussion by Samir next. Samir, if you want to share your screen, please go ahead.
Thank you. So I don't have a screen. I'm just going to talk through my points, if it's okay. But let me first start by complimenting and congratulating the researchers, Bhargavi, Nidhi, and Surabhi, on this excellent piece of work, because this is a topic which is this is fairly an unusual topic as far as Indian securities markets are concerned, when we have lived, especially for many, many years, of highly discretionary market surveillance. To move to a rule-based surveillance mechanism, firstly, is a very welcome sign. And of course, it is early days, so it is going to be challenging. And hence, any amount of research that can happen to throw light on the pros and cons of the initial baby steps, I think is fantastic. So really great work done by the researchers on picking up this very complex topic. The second point I'd like to make is, again, going back to the first point I made, which is, I think this is a very challenging topic. Market surveillance, and I come from a background where I don't have necessarily the skills to technically examine the research paper, but I've spent 5 years as somebody who ran an exchange, and in a slightly different sort of securities context, which was commodity derivatives, far more complex to move to a rule-based market surveillance sort of type environment. But however, so there was a point in time when the exchange did sort of make significant efforts to move there. And just want to share some experiences. So, one of the meetings I had with a broker in the early days, and in commodity derivatives, those of you who have experienced commodity derivative trading in India will have experienced one, significant volatility. Number two, quite a lot of start-stops in commodity trading, suspensions, banning, etc. So a fairly severe market surveillance sanctions that have taken place. So one of the traders, sort of came to me in this early days of conversation with the trader, saying that he expected the exchange to have a view on the fundamentals of that price. And at that point in time, I had a fairly long debate and argument with him that it is not the exchange's role to have a view on on the price per se, but definitely have a view on the price formation, which are two different things altogether. And this GSM goes at the heart of that heart of the debate, in the sense that the whole design of GSM is based on fundamentals. Which basically then start to say that are the exchanges required to take a view on fundamentals. And although the authors very nicely, I would say diplomatically, tiptoe around the propriety of GSM, although I would have loved to see a bit more sort of bolder sort of research on the on the propriety of GSM, as well as the criteria. Propriety may be a bit more complex, as the authors argue, but maybe the sort of the criteria that have been selected by the exchange and the regulator for entry of scripts into GSM, and exit, of course, is much more of a black box. So I do think that there is a huge question and although it is not the specific topic of the research, but it is definitely part of the overall discourse, to say whether the criteria that the exchanges through the guidance of the regulator should have been more about identifying, should have been more about an existing pattern of market manipulation. And on that there has been a tremendous amount of literature that exists in terms of the types of market manipulations that exist. And of course, every day traders are trying to sort of game the system and come out with new mechanisms. But having said that, there is tremendous amount of literature. So given that this is almost path breaking in India, which is moving to rule-based market surveillance, shouldn't the first attempt of the exchange have been basis sort of pre-existing literature and experiences around market manipulation. So I think that should have been researched in my opinion. I think so one of the other points that has been researched quite effectively is sort of the impact on price and impact on liquidity. I do think that as far as liquidity is concerned, one factor that could have been researched more deeply, which wasn't a factor, I think, or I may have sort of not understood the technicalities, but I did not come away with feeling that had been researched enough or at all, is the effect on impact cost. And to me, as somebody who ran an exchange, one of the primary functions of an exchange in facilitating price discovery is to look at impact cost and to consistently endeavor to reduce impact cost and hence be driven fundamentally in its sanctions and surveillance to constantly examine impact cost as an outcome. So if the sanctions create a worsening of impact cost, then what does that, and how do the scripts behave in the context of impact cost? Because price, for example, could be naturally being formed, whereas impact cost is really what sort of, what really hurts investors from any sanction. So I would have thought that point would have struck the attention of the researchers in terms of analyzing the impact of entry into GSM and as they move through the various stages of the graded surveillance measure. Also on page 17 of the paper, similar characteristics exiting post GSM. Very nicely, the paper talks about how most of the scripts, as they exited GSM, started to exhibit the pre-GSM characteristics. And to me, it felt like an objective of exit well served, in the sense that maybe they exited, and obviously it's not obvious from that, but maybe they exited because there wasn't any anomaly found in the trading patterns. And if they then began to exhibit pre-GSM characteristics, then maybe rightly so. And I didn't see, and I'm again, because one doesn't know at least I don't know the details, but I do find that that analysis could have looked at whether the exit of GSM and the exhibition of pre-GSM characteristics was in line with sort of expected behavior, although the researchers do very carefully say that the attempt was not made to look at the propriety of GSM nor the challenging or critique of the characteristics themselves. But I do think that if the idea was to look at and to lift up
Sameer,
the hood,
you have about 2 minutes left.
Thank you. So if the idea was to lift up the hood on the GSM itself, then I think that should have been a question that should have been asked. But on the overall, I do think that the researchers have done a fantastic job in putting a spotlight on a fairly complex topic. Market surveillance is both an art and a science, in my view. To codify market surveillance in itself, I think, is a very commendable task on talking on behalf of exchanges and regulators. I think it's the way to go. We may never be 100% rule-based, but if the attempt is to get to rule-based market surveillance, I think that's that's sort of an ideal journey. Great job done by the researchers. I do think that having picked up a very complex topic, which in India has been a very, very sensitive subject of regulator and exchange intervention, I do think that the researchers could have been a bit more bolder in challenging the propriety as well as the characteristics and researching a bit on that. And on the core research itself, I think examining the effect on impact cost should have been picked up by the researchers. And finally, a little bit more double click on why the scripts that exited GSM did exhibit pre-GSM characteristics would have been useful to study as well. But overall, I do think this has made the discourse, this paper has made the discourse on market surveillance in India richer. And I must overall must compliment the researchers for having picked up this topic and put a fairly good spotlight on this topic. So that's it from my side.
Thank you, Samir. Bhargav, if you want to respond, you can. And also there are some questions coming in, so you may want to address those as well.
Sure. Thanks, Samir. This is really encouraging. So, all right. So let me take these questions one by one, and my co-author Nidhi is also here. So Nidhi, just feel free to jump in whenever you think I'm addressing a question that you have some inputs on. So Professor Yadav's first question was whether we have seen similar interventions in other markets. And, we tried looking, and that's the thing. So the closest intervention that I could find is where exchanges actually suspend securities which are highly illiquid or which are prone to manipulation. But that's an absolute suspension, right? That's like, okay, these securities, I'm convinced, are absolutely illiquid, or the cost of continuing to allow them to trade is too high, and therefore they're suspended. In the case of GSM, I just want to highlight that these securities are not suspended. They are put in additional surveillance, which means trading is restricted. The trading restriction may be lifted the next day, the next quarter, the next month. We don't know. The amount of uncertainty that is involved in categorizing these securities and putting them under GSM, I think, is a unique feature which we couldn't find in market surveillance tools that are employed in other jurisdictions. The question on impact cost, I'll allow Nidhi to take that on. But our thought process was that if we are able to measure the impact on liquidity, I mean, surely that has some impact on the impact cost, although we haven't really, you're right, measured it as such. I just want to, maybe I haven't understood the question on exit correctly, which is that why do scripts that exit GSM continue to exhibit the pre-GSM characteristics? And here I just want to, run through again, right? We are talking about net worth related criteria. We're talking about net fixed assets. These features are not likely to change over a period of a quarter, etc. So in that case, I'm not sure if we should expect these scripts to really overnight change these features that are so inherent. And then if the objective is that I do not want to allow trading in these scripts altogether, then yes, maybe the slump in liquidity post-exit probably achieves that intention without having proved manipulation to begin with. But I'm not sure if these scripts would inherently change these basic characteristics when they exit GSM. I think Ajay has many comments, but I'll allow Nidhi, if you have any inputs, to just pitch in. In the meantime, I can just go through them.
Yeah, hi. Thank you everyone for your comments. Very useful. So on Sameer's first point of impact cost, Sameer, we did not have intraday data and we are trying to arrange for that. And that's the reason we haven't added that in the paper as of now. But we have something called a liquidity ratio, which is kind of a proxy of impact cost. And there also we see significant impacts in terms of higher illiquidity in stocks, which enter the GSM criteria. With respect to Ajay's questions related to the match balance and all those things, we have already incorporated into the paper. And when we look at treatment and control firms based on our matching, we find that there is a good balance, and hence we do not worry about our results being contaminated by the use of wrong controls or the not so correct sample for controls. With respect to Professor Yadav's question, which is why is the regulator then interested in doing this kind of regulation? Is the regulator trying to save the investors? At least from the language of the circular, I believe, and Bhargavi perhaps can add to it, it seemed that the regulator was concerned about people trading in these stocks and they wanted to raise an alert. But our suspicion is that there were so many other firms which had similar fundamentals, if we want to characterize it in that manner. But there were only a few firms which entered this. So we are not clear as to why that is happening, and that's why we say that this is rules versus discretion. There are some firms which have similar fundamentals enter into the GSM criteria. Their liquidity is hurt, cost of trading for those investors get hurt, cost of capital for the firms get impacted, but likely to be impacted, and we hope to incorporate cost of capital into the paper at a later stage. But other firms which display similar characteristics, we do not see that. And our prime message here is that implementing such mechanisms need to be thought of clearly before implementation, because they may have very adverse impacts both for investors and firms. Over to Bhargavi.
Sure. Just one question that has not been answered is about the Securities Appellate Tribunal. I'm sorry if I missed anything else. So Ajay, so this surveillance mechanism is not really an order of SEBI. It's introduced by the exchanges. The exchanges order putting somebody into surveillance mechanism, can it be challenged or not? It has not been tested in jurisprudence. However, in these 2 years, I believe the Ministry of Corporate Affairs struck down about hundreds of companies which it believed were shell companies, and some of these happened to be listed, and the Ministry of Corporate Affairs directed the exchanges to put them in stage 6. That order was indeed challenged. And I believe the SAT reversed that order for some of these firms which were directly put into stage 6, not because they met the criteria, but because the Ministry of Corporate Affairs had struck them off the register because it believed they were shell firms.
Can I just follow up on this? Does SEBI or NSE have a law that shows the criterion and claims that you will be thrown into stage 3 when ABC criteria are met? Or is it just a press release that, yeah, we think of these things, but you know what, on the ground, we do whatever we want?
So there is no law from SEBI. It is the press release of the exchanges.
In the context of such a press release, for example, exchanges in the US have committees which are kind of delisting committees. So the exchange has the right to show cause, issue a show cause notice to the firm to say, why shouldn't we delist your company? And so it goes through a sort of natural justice process, which would say, we're giving you the chance first to respond, and then we take the action of, say, delisting. Now here, you're not going straight to delisting, you are going to, severe restrictions, and you seem to suggest that, 41% of the firms didn't meet the criteria, or that, where the criteria are met, all the firms which meet the criteria are not in it. So there is discretion involved there, and it's only fair to give an opportunity to the firm to do it. And that kind of follows up on Ajay's point.
Bhargavi, this is Harsh. Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So the basic question I have is, as far as I understand, surveillance is the domain of the exchanges. I mean, SEBI, other than saying that the exchanges ought to surveil and look for things like price rigging and all, it does not really formulate any legal foundation for that. It's up to the exchanges. It's a procedural aspect of running an exchange. And if that be so, I mean, at some level it is discretion, right? Exchanges are free to surveil whoever they want because it's their responsibility.
No, Harsh. Exchanges
Can I just
cannot
comment on that?
violate. Exchanges cannot violate rule of law.
So having run an exchange, I can tell you that the exchanges are required to comply in every of their department because they are sort of an agent of the state in that sense. In every aspect, they're required to comply with some or the other regulation by the exchange, by the regulator. And in this case, the exchanges are regulated by what is called as the SECC set of regulations. And they are fairly enabling in nature, which means that the exchanges do have wide-ranging powers that have been delegated to them by the regulator to act, but they are all within the rule of law.
No, that is exactly what I meant. What I meant is that to my understanding, since I am also associated with an exchange, that the regulator just says you ought to surveil, and here are some other things that you do, but the exact mechanics of surveillance is left to the exchanges. Is that correct? And if that be so, where is the issue of rule of law here? It's a procedural detail that the exchange follows.
So if I may just come in here. So Harsh, it is true that the design of the surveillance tool is left to the exchange. However, the exchanges are financial market infrastructure institutions. And if you look at your SCRA and the SECC regulations, they impose an obligation of fairness when designing these processes. There is a reason why the exchange has bylaws in the way its members will be regulated and its interaction with the members will be dealt with. So for example, can the exchange say that the trading hours for Bhargavi's firm are 9 to 1, but the trading hours for Harsh's firm are 9
absolutely.
to 3?
So Bhargavi, we have said the same thing. So I'm saying it's under the exchange's own contract with its members where this issue will come. This is not between the regulators and exchange. This is between exchange and members. And I think there are PFMI guidelines, principles of financial market infrastructure, which are globally, I think those are more important here than...
Harsh, for an analogy, if I am a restaurant chain, I can write 2 different contracts with 2 different outlets, and that's perfectly fine. It's my business decision. I have all discretion. But if I'm an exchange, I can't. I am obliged to behave through certain concepts of rule of law. So equal treatment is inherent in the behavior of an exchange.
No, Ajay, I get it. I'm making a different point. I'm saying it's an equal treatment deal between the exchange and the members, not between SEBI and the exchange or SEBI and the members. SEBI has no oversight over the members on these matters.
Sure, but then if the exchange behaves in ways that violate equal treatment, it can be challenged at SAT.
Yeah, by the members,
every order
by the members
of the
in court.
exchange.
Yeah, by the members.
Every order. Yes, that's right. However, I want to say one more thing is that since surveillance tools are left to the discretion of the exchanges.
Sorry to interrupt, but I think we're running out of time here. So if you can come through quickly, great. Or you could take this probably offline. So sorry to interrupt.
No, so I'll just complete my sentence. These surveillance tools are, implemented in a coordinated fashion by BSE, NSE, and potentially there were a third equity segment exchange large enough, even by them, because the whole idea is that you do not want to subject yourself and your members to harsher treatment than what the other exchanges are doing. And therefore, it will all be done in coordination, SEBI with SEBI's blessing. So for example, SEBI explicitly acknowledges in its annual report that the GSM, we thought of the GSM as a preemptive measure. So, I mean, of course, there are gray lines in de facto involvement of SEBI in this, but can this order be challenged before SAT? I think so, yes. Is there an obligation of fairness? I think even the PFMI rules would say that there is an obligation of fairness for financial market infrastructure.
Thank you. Thank you, Bhargavi.
Thank you.